May the peace of our Lord and His grace be with brothers and sisters.
愿主的平安和恩惠给予每位弟兄姐妹。
If I mention the name Steve Jobs, I think most of us might immediately think of the founder of Apple Computer.
当我们谈到贾博士的时候，大家会马上想到他是苹果公司的总裁。
2 years ago, he died.
2年前他过世了。
When he died, he made his company the most valuable brand in the world.
当他过世的时候，苹果公司呢，世界上资产最多的公司。
And the company worth over $400 billion.
这个公司呢，价值超过4000亿。
And they have approximately $87 billion cash in their bank.
他们有870亿的现款呢，在银行里面。
Now, Steve Jobs, he himself, with a net worth over $10.2 billion.
那贾博士他本身呢，就有100亿的资产。
In his final days, he reflected on his life.
在他最后的日子，他回想他的一生。
And I'm going to quote some of his quotes.
我要来述说他所讲的话。
This is what he said. He said, "Remembering that I will be dead soon is the most important tools I have ever encountered."
那他说呢，当我想到我即将死亡呢，这对我来讲，这是最重要的工具。
It helps me make the big choices in life.
它帮助我来选择最大的抉择。
Because almost everything in external expectations,
不论各种期待。
all prides, all fears of embarrassments, all failures,
不论是骄傲或是害羞的事，
these things just fall away in the face of death,
当面对死亡的时候，这些都要消失了，
leaving only what is truly important.
只有剩下的唯一重要的事。
Sometimes I believe in God, sometimes I don't.
有时候我信神，有时候我又不相信神。
I think it's 50-50 maybe.
我想或许是50%吧。
But ever since I have had cancer, I've been thinking about it more.
但是自从我得了癌症以后，我思索更多这方面的事。
And I find myself believing a bit more.
我发现呢，我更相信神一点。
I saw my life like an arc,
我看我的一生呢，就好像一道湖。
and that it would end, and compared to that which is death, nothing mattered.
但是要结束了，当面对死亡的一切都不重要了。
You're born alone, you're gonna die alone.
你是一个人单独的出生，也要一个人单独的过世。
And does anything else really matter?
那如果有什么值得重要的事情的话，
There is nothing.
实际上是没有的。
Steve Jobs is considered by many the greatest inventor, the greatest entrepreneur, the greatest CEO of our time.
贾博士呢，他被认为是呢最大的发明家、最大的企业家，是在我们这个时代。
He climbed to the top of the world
他爬到世界的尖端，
with such a great success that no one in our time can compare.
他的成就呢，在我们这个世界上呢，是没有人可以跟他相比的。
Yet he concluded his life by saying nothing in this world matters in the face of death.
但他却说呢，当他面对死亡的时候，在这世界上没有一件事重要的。
Money, luxury, status, fame means nothing to him anymore.
对他来讲，钱财、地位、名声都不重要了。
Now there was one guy greater in splendor and fame than Steve Jobs.
有一个人呢，他的荣耀呢，他的光彩胜过于贾博士。
No one before him or after him has his glory and splendor.
没有人在他之前或在之后胜过他的荣耀和光彩。
His wisdom and literary attainment were unequaled by any others.
他的智慧呢，是没有人可以跟他相比的。
Now, 3,000 years ago, Solomon became the icon of kingly glory.
3000年前，所罗门成为这个荣耀的象征。
Solomon was born around 1050 BC.
所罗门王他在西元前1000年之前出生。
And his parents were King David and Bathsheba.
他的父母是大卫王和拔示巴。
The reign of Solomon began with a very honorable request to God.
那所罗门王开始的时候，他向神请求一件事。
Solomon asked not for long life for himself, nor for riches, nor for death of his enemies.
所罗门他向神所要求的，并不是财富，也不是敌人的死亡，
But he asked for the wisdom to rule God's people.
他却向神要求说，是给他智慧，能够来统领百姓。
And let's turn to 1 King chapter 4, verse 29.
我们请翻开列王志上第4章，
1 King chapter 4, verse 29.
列王记上第4章的第29节。
Verse 29. 1 King chapter 4, verse 29.
列王记上4章29节。
Verse 29, God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. 30.
30
Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the men of the east and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. 31.
31
He was wiser than any other, including Ethan and Isahite, wiser than Heman. We'll just skip all these names. And his fame spread all surrounding nations. So with that, God gave him the greatest wisdom in the world.
神是给所罗门极大的智慧聪明。
Along with these great wisdom, because God was so pleased with his request, he also gave Solomon all the things that he did not ask for.
那神因为很喜悦所罗门王呢，所罗门所没有请求的，神也赐给他。
Let's look at chapter 3, verse 13.
我们请翻开第3章的第13节，
Chapter 3, verse 13.
以列王记上第3章13节。
Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings.
你所没有的求的，我也是给你，就是富足尊荣，使你在世日子列王中没有一个人比的。
Solomon's time was a golden age of Israel in all its splendor.
那所罗门王在世的时候是以色列的黄金时代。
Let's look at the things that God gave Solomon during that time.
我们来看神所赐给所罗门王的，在那个时候，
Let's turn to chapter 10, verse 14.
我们请翻开第10章的14节。
Chapter 10, verse 14.
10章14节。
Actually, it's from verse 14 to verse 22. It records the splendor of Solomon's days.
在从列王记上10章的14节到22节所记载的是，在所罗门王的时候，他们的富足。
His throne was made out of ivory and it overlaid with fine gold.
他的宝座呢是用象牙石打造的，还用包裹的金片。
There are 6 steps that leads up to his throne.
那有6个阶梯到他的宝座。
On each side of each step, there is a carving of a lion.
那在旁边呢，靠近扶手有狮子站立。
And those lions were made out of pure gold.
那狮子是用金子做的。
Solomon's throne was with armrest.
那这个宝座有扶手，
He has a footstool that was made out of pure gold.
它有台阶呢，那个也是这个黄金做的。
Now, here in verse 14, it says that every year he receives 666 talents of weight of gold.
那这边有提到说，他每年呢拿到600舍克拉的他连得的银子。
So I was curious how much is a talent weights.
那我就是想说，一他连得到底是值多少
So I
呢？
researched, and there are various different calculations, but I averaged them out. It's approximately 100 pounds.
那一他连得呢，差不多等于是100磅。
So he received 66,600 pounds of gold every year.
所以他拿到是66000磅的他连的金子。
So Solomon made 200 large shield hammered gold.
那所罗门王呢，他也做了300个金子的盾牌，
And then he made 200 smaller shield of hammered gold.
那又用打了200面的金子的挡牌。
Now, all King Solomon's goblets were of pure gold.
所罗门王的酒杯呢，也是金子造的。
And all the articles in the palace of Forest of Lebanon were of pure gold.
他黎巴嫩王宫里面的一切的器皿呢，都是金子造的。
Now, the Bible says nothing was made out of silver because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days.
在所罗门王的时代呢，圣经上说呢，没有东西是用银子造的，因为在那个时候银子看起来是不算值钱的。
This king of Jews was truly a king of glory.
这个犹大的王呢，真的是这个光彩的国王。
Yeah, but nothing was more glorious than what came out of his lips,
但
his
是
mouth.
更重要的是，他嘴巴里说出来的话呢，更是有荣耀。
In chapter 10 here, it records that the queen of Sheba traveled approximately 1,200 miles to test Solomon's wisdoms with hard questions.
在第10章呢，也记载说，示巴女王呢，她旅行了超过1200里呢，来这个朝见这个所罗门王。
And all the answer that Solomon gave her made her breathless.
那所罗门王回答他一切难解的话题呢，让他目瞪口呆。
Solomon penned over 1,000 hymns,
所罗门王他也做了1000首诗，
and he spoke about 3,000 proverbs.
他也说了3000句的箴言。
But even being the most famous and most powerful man in the world in his last day,
虽然
in his days,
在他那个时代呢，他是最有权势的人，
however, at his old age, he penned the book of Ecclesiastes.
但是在他晚年的时候，他写了一本传道书。
In this book, the word vanity occurs 37 times.
在传道书呢，他就提到说虚空呢37次，
And then the phrase under the sun, which means earthly life, appears 29 times.
那他提到说在日光之下呢，也就是说在世界上的生活呢27次。
So this book, I could say that this is a reflection, life reflection of Solomon.
所以传道书呢是反映着所罗门王一生的生活。
He concluded that all earthly life is vanity, it's empty, it's futile.
他的结论是，人生在世呢是虚空的，是没有意义的。
Let's turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1.
我们请翻开传道书的第1章的第1节。
Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1.
传道书1章1节，
He begins the book with meaningless, meaningless.
他
Said,
开头就说虚空的虚空，虚空的虚空，
utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless.
凡事都是虚空。
Solomon could not find any happiness or meaning in his worldly sensuous life.
所罗门王在他这个世界上的荣华富贵的生活中找不到意义。
His soul was never satisfied with all these pleasures that he had in this life,
他
or
的
this wealth.
他的灵魂呢，不能够从这世界上的财富得到满足。
If we look through this book, book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon tried to find satisfaction under the sun, but nothing is new. This is recorded in verse 4.
那从第4节我们看到，所罗门王发现，在日光之下呢，没有一件新事。
And then verse 12 to 18, he turned to philosophy and knowledge.
在12节到18节呢，所罗门王转向这个智慧，
But then it was chasing after winds.
但他也觉得这个智慧呢，也像是捕风。
In chapter 2, he turned to pleasure, he turned to construction, gardening, cattle breeding, art collecting, and music.
在第2章呢，所罗门王转向这个享乐，转向建造城池、水池，转向这个花园，但是没有一件满足他。
And then in chapter 5, he tried to accumulate wealth, but he found all these things vain and futile.
在第5章呢，所罗门王转向追求财富，但他也发现一切都是虚空的。
He characterized the pursuit of pleasure as chasing after wind.
他结论是追求这个享乐呢，就像是在捕风。
It's a meaningless grasping at the air that you think you're grabbing something, but it's actually nothing in your hand.
是没有意义的，就像抓空气一样，我们以为我们抓住了什么，但是是什么也没有得到。
Solomon, the wisest man ever lived.
所罗门王是世界上最有智慧的人，
He was the richest man in his time,
他在那个时代呢是最富有的人，
most splendorous and most glorious kingship.
最有荣耀光彩的一个国王。
Yet at the end of his life, he said, all is vanity.
但是在他生命的终结的时候，他说一切都是虚空的，
All is just chasing after the wind.
一切都是捕风。
Have you noticed the commonality of between Steve Jobs and Solomon?
那我们有没有注意到所罗门跟贾伯斯他们相像的地方呢？
Both were at the top of their world.
他们都是站在世界的尖端，
Both were with great wealth and wisdom.
他们都有很大的财富和智慧。
But yet, both at the last day of their life concluded that their life is meaningless.
但他们生命的最后的终结一切都是没有意义的。
All the things in this world is but nothing.
这世界上一切东西都是没有用的，
They came alone and died alone.
他们是单独的出生，也是孤独的死亡。
Let's look at Job chapter 1 verse 21.
我们看耶伯记的第1章的第21节。
This is actually a quote from Steve Jobs, but quite funny that this is a book in Job
那
that
这
has the same quote.
贾伯斯是这样说，在耶伯记我们也找到相同的说法。
Chapter 1 verse 21.
耶伯记1章21节，
Chapter 1 verse 21.
耶伯记1章21节。
Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised.
说我赤身出于母胎，也必赤身归回。赏赐的是耶和华，收起的也是耶和华。耶和华的名是应当称颂的。
Steve Jobs also said that we came alone and we die alone.
贾伯斯说的是，我们孤独的出生，我们也要孤独的死亡。
We came into this world with nothing, and we die taking nothing with us.
我们来到世界上的时候，没有带着什么；我们要走的时候，离开这世界也不能带走什么。
This is also recorded in Timothy chapter 1.
这也是记载在提摩太前书的第1章。
Timothy chapter 1 verse 6.
提摩太前书1章的第6节。
I'm sorry, 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 7.
提摩太前书的1章。
6章. 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 7.
提摩太前书的第6章的第7节。
Chapter 6 verse 7.
提摩太前书6章7节。
For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it.
因为我们没有带什么到世上来，也不能带什么去。
And they both, Solomon and Steve Jobs, realized that.
所罗门和贾伯斯他们都明白这一点。
All the wealth that they accumulated in this world, not a penny they could take with them after death.
他们在世界上所累积的一切财富，在他们死亡的时候，他们连1分钱都不能带去。
Now these two, the Bible says, these two are so smart. These are two very extremely smart people.
这2位呢，都是极端聪明的人，
But unfortunately, neither of them knew how to earn and accumulate the everlasting treasure in heaven.
但是很可惜，这2位都不知道要怎么样来储存那永远的财富。
Let's look at Matthew chapter 6.
我们来看马太福音的第6章。
Matthew chapter 6 verse 19.
马太福音第6章的第19节。
Matthew chapter 6 verse 19 to 21.
马太福音6章19到21节。
Verse 19 to 21.
马太福音第6章19节，不要为自己积攒财宝在地上，地上有虫子咬，能朽坏，也有贼挖窟窿来偷20。只要积攒财宝在天上，天上没有虫子咬，不能朽坏，也没有贼挖窟窿来偷。21，因为你们的财宝在哪里，你的心也在那里。
Verse 20 here Jesus tells his disciples that to lay up your treasure in heaven.
在20节呢，主耶稣告诉他的门徒说，要积攒财宝在天上。
Now, what is this treasure and how do we lay up this treasure in heaven?
那什么是财宝呢？那我们怎么样把财宝累积在天上呢？
Here in this passage, Jesus identified two categories of treasure.
在这里呢，主耶稣谈到2种财宝。
The first category is in verse 19, which is we could call the earthly treasure.
那第一种财宝呢，记载在19节，我们可以说是世界上的财宝。
Now, these treasures are stored on this earth.
那这个财宝是累积在地上的，
They are temporal and fluid.
那它们是这个短暂的，而且是流动的。
What do I mean by fluid? Because they could come and go. These wealth could come and go, and they could be lost through destruction or theft.
为什么说是流动性呢？因为这个财宝可以来来去去，也可能会被毁灭掉。
These treasures include money, include our house, include cars, include clothing, include jobs.
那这地上的财宝，代表是我们的钱财、我们的健康、我们的房子等等。
Isn't it true that money comes and go, jobs comes and go?
那我们的钱财不是来来去去，我们的工作不是有时得到又失去了吗？
They're not there forever.
他们并不是永远的。
Jesus is not telling us that we don't need to work hard.
主耶稣并不是告诉我们说不应该努力工作，
In fact, we still need to work hard to provide for our family.
当然是我们应该要好好的努力的工作来供应我们的家庭。
Unfortunately, money it is a necessity to sustain life.
当然我们需要钱来维持我们在地上的生
But
活。
what Jesus is teaching us is that we should not focus our energy and focus acquiring these worldly treasures.
但是主耶稣所要提醒我们是，我们不应该专注在累积这些钱财。
We should not focus on these worldly treasure in place of worshiping God or taking care of our family.
我们不要说专注在累积地上的钱财，而忽略了照顾我们的家庭或是敬拜神。
Now, if we look into Steve Jobs' life and we look into Solomon's life in the Bible, they don't have a good relationship with their family.
我们看到贾伯斯或是在圣经上的所罗门，他们跟他们的家人似乎没有很好的关系，
Neither do they have a good relationship with God
他们跟神也没有很好的关系，
because they were all focused on these worldly pleasures, worldly attainments.
因为他们所追求的是这世界上的享受，这世界上的成就。
Now, what Jesus is telling us is that we should place our focus on the treasure in heaven.
那主耶稣所要告诉我们是，我们要专注在累积财宝在天上。
He is also telling us a very big secret
他也告诉我们一个很大的秘密，
that we could actually convert these earthly treasures in the means of worshiping God into a spiritual treasure.
我们可以借着敬拜神呢，我们可以把地上的财宝变成天上的财宝。
And therefore, he mentioned this spiritual treasure in the second category. This treasure is identified as the everlasting treasure that will not be, it's not destructive or could be taken away.
所以主耶稣谈到第二种财宝，就是属灵的财宝，天上的财宝呢是虫子不能咬，也不能朽坏，也不会被偷走的。
Now, also, this treasure is given by God.
而且这个财宝呢是神给我们的。
Now, I wanted to spend the rest of this morning to talk about three main ways that we could acquire this spiritual treasure.
那接下来呢，我想跟大家来分享，我们可以以3种方法来累积这天上的财宝。
Of course, there are so many other ways, but I just wanted to focus on three.
那当然有很多种方法，但是我只想要提3种。
We'll focus on salvation, we're focusing on offering, and we'll focus on serving.
我们要来谈到的是救恩、奉献和我们的服事。
Now, talking about salvation, the best treasure we could lay up in heaven are the treasure of salvation.
那提到救恩呢，我们所能够累积最好的财宝呢，就是救恩。
Now, this salvation is both for us and also for the other people.
这个救恩呢，是为了我们自己，也是为了他人。
Why for us?
为什么 为我们自己呢？
No matter how much treasure we laid up in heaven, if we cannot go to heaven, we will not be able to enjoy them.
为什么为我们自己呢？因为不论我们累积了多少财宝在天上，如果我们不能达到天上的话，那么这些财宝对我们都没有用了。
So no matter how much work you've done, and if you did not get baptized into Christ, then you cannot go and enjoy all those treasure that you laid up in heaven.
所以不论你在世界上做了多少的工，但是如果你没有奉耶稣基督的名受洗的话，你就不能达到天上去享受这些财宝。
But for today's purpose, we'll talk about winning souls.
那今天呢，我们要谈到是来赚灵魂，
Because our spiritual convocation is near.
我们的灵恩布道会即将要举行。
Winning souls is the greatest treasure we could store up in heaven.
赚灵魂呢，是我们在天上所能累积最好的财宝。
Because to God, the souls of men is the most important thing that matters to Him.
因为在神的眼中呢，人的灵魂对他来讲是最重要的。
Each person that believes in God is a treasure to God.
每一个相信神的人，在神的眼中都是宝贝的。
Let's look at Exodus. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5.
我们翻开出埃及记的19章的第5节。
Exodus chapter 19, verse 5.
出埃及记19章5节，
Verse 5.
第5节。
Here it says, "Now if you obey me fully and keep my commandment, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possessions." We could actually infer this as those that believe in God and worship God is a treasured possession of God.
那我们可以引用这节经节来说，那些相信耶稣基督的人呢，相信神的人呢，就是神的子民呢，也是在神眼中是宝贝的。
So just imagine this: every person you bring to church is a treasure in the eyes of God.
每一个我们带来教会的，在神的眼中都是宝贝。
Now, if we look outside of our church,
我们看我们教会外面
there are just so many treasures waiting for us to bring in.
有那么多的财宝等宝贝等着我们带进来。
There are approximately 300 million people in the United States.
有3亿人，在世界上有3亿人。
In New Jersey alone, there are 9 million people.
在新泽西州呢，就有900万人。
And in Hillsborough alone, there are hundreds of thousands.
在这个喜乐坡呢，本来就可能有上万人。
So how many people can we gather these treasure that we could actually bring to church, fill up the entire church, and store up these treasure in heaven?
那我们可以带多少人来到教会，把教会给填满，把这个财宝累积在天上呢？
Now we all know that bringing people to church is hard.
那我们都知道带人来教会不是容易的事，
Especially in today's society that people follow their own desires.
特别是今天呢，大家追求自己的私意。
And especially in today's society, there are so many people that seeks after worldly knowledge.
那今天有很多人追求世界上的知识，
And so it's kind of hard for them to open up their heart to believe.
所以很难呢让他们打开他们的心来接受。
But now here's a secret.
那有一个秘密，
The Bible says that it is God that brings them to church, right? But then God also tells us to go and preach onto the world.
那圣经上是跟我们讲说是神拣选人的，但是圣经上也告诉我们差遣我们要出去传福音。
That's all we have to do is just to sow the seeds and God will let it grow.
那我们所要做的就是撒种，神会让它生长。
And so that's why in Mark chapter 16 verse 15,
在马可福音的16章的第15节，
Jesus said to them, to the disciples, "Go into the world and preach the good news to all creations." So that's our commission. That's what we need to do is just to preach.
那我们的这个使命呢，就是像马可福音16章15节，就是要往普天下去传福音给万民听。
Now the secret is every word that we preach becomes a precious value that we could actually store in heaven.
那的秘密就是我们所传的话呢，我们所传的福音呢，就是我们累积在天上的财宝。
So if just to convert it into a worldly understanding, that if a word that we said equals $1 in the eyes of God,
那我们打个比方来说，如果我们所传的福音的话语呢，是在神的眼中是1块钱。
and now let's just for an example, we invite someone to church and we might say to them that, do you want to come to church? We have spiritual convocation on April 16th to the 20th. Do you want to come?
那或许我们邀请人说，我们在4月16号到20号，我们这里要举行灵恩布道会，请你来参加好吗？
That short sentence of 21 words,
那这短短的在英文21个字，
if each word equates to $1, then that's $21 that we stored up in heaven.
如果说一个字等于1块钱的话，那么这样我们就累积了21块钱。
Now, what can we lose? What can we lose if we by opening our mouth to invite someone else to come to church?
那我们开口邀请人来参加我们的灵恩布道会，我们会损失什么呢？
The worst thing that could have happened is he or she declines our invitation.
那最糟糕的可能就是他拒绝接受。
Unfortunately, that might be their loss for that temporary moment.
那对他们来讲，可能是他们暂时的这个损失，
But that seed already planted in them.
但是这个种子已经撒下去了。
We wait for God to see when it's going to grow.
我们等着看什么时候神能够让它生长。
Now, for us,
对我们来说，
it's a great thing
那是一个很好的事，
because we just earn value in heaven.
因为我们已经赚到累积在天上的财宝了。
Although we haven't seen them come to church,
虽然我们还没有看到他们来教会，
and we don't have to wait until they come to church to earn reward in heaven,
我们也不用等到他们来到教会以后，我们才在我们天上累积财宝。
by opening our mouth to invite them, that's already storing up treasure in heaven.
我们只要开口向人邀请，我们就已经开始累积我们的财宝在天上。
So who gained more at the end?
那这样子到底谁赢得最多呢？
We do.
就是我们。
Now, so therefore, introducing our friends and relatives to Jesus is a simple invitation that we could actually earn this reward in heaven.
让我们介绍人我介绍我们的亲友来相信耶稣，这是我们最可以得到天上财宝一个简单的方法。
Now, if we could bring them to church and they believe and confess their sins and be baptized,
那如果我们带人来教会，他们认罪悔改受洗，
that is the best treasure.
那这是最好的财宝。
Because God says that those that believe in Him and follow His commandment is a treasured possession of God.
因为神说，那个相信他、遵守他命令的人，都是他的财宝。
Although we know that it is God that brought them to church.
当然，我们知道是神带领他们来到教会。
But quite frankly, that if we look at it, that becomes a surprised bonus for us.
但是对我们来说呢，这是对我们来说可以说是一个很惊奇的这个红利。
Who doesn't like bonuses?
有谁不喜欢奖金呢？
Right? So if we are bringing a person to church, that is a bonus that we get in church in heaven.
如果我们带人来教会呢，我们在天上就有奖金了。
Now we also have many flyers that we pass out before spiritual convocation.
那我们在灵恩布道会之前，我们也发传单。
If we think that each flyer equates to, let's say, $5, $5 reward in heaven.
如果我们说一个传单等于是在天上的5块钱的，
What is your investment in this work? Only time.
那我们来做这件事情，我们要投资什么？只是我们的时间。
So just think about how much reward we could actually save up in heaven by simply passing out these flyers.
那我们可以想，我们在天上的奖赏有多少？只要我们很简单的把这个传单给发送出去。
There's so much that we could do with little effort that we could have great results of great rewards in heaven.
有很多事情我们可以做，只要我们花小小的力气，我们就可以累积我们的财富在天上。
Now, offering is also another easy way of storing up treasure in heaven.
奉献呢，也是一个来累积财宝在天上一个很简单的方法。
Offering in terms of giving is one of the most direct way of converting our earthly treasure to a spiritual treasure.
奉献可以说是一个最单纯直接的方法，就是把我们世界的财宝变成天上的财宝。
By using our resources, which include time, money, talents, in the advance work of to advance the work of God.
那就是利用我们这世界上的资源，就是我们的钱财、我们的时间、我们的才干。
All these resources that we offered up is converted from a material treasure into a spiritual treasure.
那我们奉献呢，就把这个物质的财宝变成这个灵性属灵的财宝。
And it is now stored and transferred and stored in this everlasting bank in heaven.
那它已经转换而储存在天上永远的银行里面。
Every sacrifice made for the purpose of blessing or helping others, every means of service in church.
那我们在教会的每个服事，我们对人的每一个牺牲，
All these offering becomes a reward in heaven.
这些奉献呢，都成为天上的财宝。
Luke chapter 6 verse 38.
路加福音第6章的38节。
Luke chapter 6 verse 38.
路加福音6章38节。
Chapter 6 verse 38.
路加福音6章38。
Give and it will be given to you.
你们要给人，就必有给你们的。
This is very true in the house of God.
这个在这个神的家里，真是一个箴言。
Because when we invest invest our resource in the house of God,
因为我们把我们的资源奉献在神的家，
God will record every dime, every sweat, every tear that we shed for the house of God, and He will reward us according to our work.
那神会把我们所奉献的每一分钱每一滴汗，还有每一滴泪水呢，都把它记录下来，而且会来奖赏我们。
Think about it. The money that we earn in this world, when we die, it belongs to someone else.
我们想一想，我们在世界上所赚的钱，当我们过世的时候，这钱就归别人了。
Now, will they appreciate that money, or will they make those a good use out of those money?
他们会不会来感激呢？他们会不会好好的利用这个钱呢？
Or will they squander away that money, that hard-earned money, the result of your labor?
还是他们随便的挥花你所费力所赚起来的钱呢？
We don't know.
我们不知道。
But once that money is spent, it's gone.
但是那钱要是花了就没有了。
Look at Solomon.
看看所罗门
He
王，
stored up all that wealth, all that treasure.
他累积了多少的财富？
But later, it was taken by the Persians and the Babylonians.
但是后来呢，却被波斯和巴比伦夺去了。
Steve Jobs also did not take any of that $10.2 billion that he earned.
贾伯斯呢，他也带不走他那1000亿的财产，100亿的财产。
Now, if we could take our money and start planning our future in heaven,
如果我们把我们的钱财因为我们的钱财开始计划我们未来的投资，
offer it to the church ministry,
来奉献在教会的宣道，
or even help in very small ways.
或是在一个小小的事情来帮助教会。
For example, there are these sisters in Elizabeth Church.
譬如说，在伊丽莎白教会有一些姐妹，
They often offer the time and money to prepare snacks after the afternoon church service.
她们常常在星期六下午聚会完以后，用自己的钱和时间来准备点心，
So that the brothers and sisters, they could enjoy fellowship after service and enjoy those snacks.
让这个弟兄姐妹们在聚会完能够彼此交通团
Now,
契。
no one told them to do that or asked them to buy those snacks.
没有人告诉他们这样子做，或是买这些点
But
心，
they're willingly to spend that time and effort and money for the brothers and sisters.
但是他们愿意花钱花时间来帮助弟兄姐妹
In
们。
those small ways, little money that they spend, the little time effort that they spend, is translated into a treasure in heaven.
用这小小的方法，用一点钱、一点精力呢、时间呢，他们就累积财富在天上。
Now, besides converting these physical wealth to spiritual wealth,
那除了说把这些物质的财富转变成属灵的财富之外，
God is also very pleased with us serving Him.
那神也很喜悦我们来服侍他。
Let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12.
我们翻开生命记第10章的12节，
Chapter 10, verse 12.
生命记第10章12节。
Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12.
申命记10章12节。
Verse 12, And now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul.
以色列啊，现在主你神向你所要的是什么呢？只要你敬畏主你的神，谨守遵行他的道，爱他，尽心尽性侍奉他。
Here is also another way of very easy way to store up treasure in heaven by serving God.
这里是另外一个很简单的能够累积财富的方法，就是来服侍神。
Like I said, every work that we do in church, in serving God, translate into a reward.
我们在教会的每一项服侍呢，都转化成天上的财富。
Our church has a very good example of that.
我们教会也有很好的例子。
Almost everyone served one way or another during our afternoon cleaning.
譬如说，在安息日下午聚会完以后，几乎我们每一个人呢，都参与服侍的工作，清扫的工作。
Even little things as emptying out the garbage can.
连最简单的事，譬如说倒垃圾。
Or we see some litter on the ground and picking them out, throwing in a garbage can.
或是我们随地把地上的纸屑给捡起来。
All these little work becomes a treasure in heaven.
就是这小小的一点工作呢，就成为我们在天上的财宝。
Matthew chapter 16, Jesus says that God will reward every man according to his work.
那在马太福音16章有提到说，神会来奖赏每一个人所做的工。
Again, there are so much things that we could do to serve God.
我们可以有很多的方法来服侍神。
Simply open our eyes up and look around.
我们只要张开我们的眼睛来四周观察。
See what kind of work or ministry that we could be most effective in.
那我们可以看我们可以做什么来帮助教会的宣道各方面。
Maybe it could be making a coffee or tea in the morning for all the brothers and sisters.
或是甚至是在早上呢，来煮咖啡来招待弟兄姐妹们。
Maybe it could be wiping the tables after our lunch hours.
或是在吃完午餐以后来擦桌子。
Maybe it is taking the Bibles and the hymn books and putting them back on the rack.
那或许是把这个赞美诗和圣经归回这个架子上面。
Maybe it is joining the choir, ushering, RE, hospitality, evangelism. All these work are all reward that we could translate into heaven.
或是参与宗教教育合唱团等等事工呢，都是我们累积财富的方法。
So look at all these things that we just mentioned. Isn't it so easy for us to store up treasure in heaven?
我们看看我们所提到这一切，不是累积财宝在天上是很简单的事吗？
The only problem, there is a problem, is whether we want to store up our treasure in heaven or not.
那唯一的问题是我们是否有心要来累积财宝在天上呢？
Now I remember there was this commercial, this funny commercial.
我记得有一个商业广告。
It's a commercial about New York lottery.
那就是纽约州的这个乐透。
So the commercial goes like this: that suddenly there were the bundles and chunks of money falling from the sky.
那这个广告是忽然间呢，天上有很多的钱掉下来。
Now a man was standing at the window looking out, and he's seeing all these money dropping from the sky.
那有一个人呢，他站在这个窗户，那看到钱财从天上掉下来。
And his wife came and said, "Oh, let's go get those money."
那他的妻子说：“我们赶快去捡财吧。”
And he said, "Nah, not yet. It's only about $10, $20 million out there."
那他说：“等一下，现在只有差不多1000万或2000万。”
And then he said, "Let's wait." Then the scene changes and focus on the person that scream out, "Money!"
然后这个画面转变了，看到一个人在喊着说：“钱啊！”
And then you see all these mobs of people rushing in, and then all of a sudden they all retreated, and all the monies are gone.
那很多人都出来抓起钱，那一下子钱就全部没有了。
These couple look stunned.
那这对夫妻呢就很惊讶的样子。
Then a message pop out that says, "What are you waiting for?"
那有一个信息就出来说，你在等什么呢？
It is so true, isn't it?
那这个是很真切的，不是吗？
We are also in this world where God is laying all these money around us.
那我们在这世界上，好像神也是把这些钱
There's so
在我们
much
四周。
opportunity. I'm sorry.
啊，go ahead.
There's so much opportunity for us to pick up those money and store it up in heaven.
我们实在是有很多的机会能够捡这些钱财呢，把它累积在天上。
Now, the question is whether we're standing there looking at other people picking up money, or are we in there picking up those money
那问题
ourselves?
是我们是站在那边看着别人捡这些钱财呢，还是我们在里面也捡钱财？
Like Steve Jobs, like Solomon, they realized late in their life that all these wealth that they accumulated means nothing to them.
那就像贾伯斯和所罗门，他们发觉在地上所累积的财富呢，对他们都是没有意义的。
But today we know the secret that we could convert our earthly treasure to heavenly treasure.
那今天我们已经学习到，我们可以把我们地上的财宝转换成天上的财宝的一个秘密。
We need to grab onto these opportunities that we could store up these real treasure in heaven.
我们要抓住机会，让我们来累积天上的财宝。
Now we have 2 family evangelical services
我们
coming
有
up.
即将有几开2次的家庭布道会。
One is tomorrow at Brother Ted Lin's house at 3:30.
第一个是明天下午3点半在林伊德家的家庭布道会。
The other one is next Sunday at my house
那
at 4:30.
第二次呢是在下礼拜天呢，在沈家明弟兄4点半。
Now, this is a great opportunity to introduce truth seekers and friends to come and listen in a very homey and comfortable environment.
那这是一个好的机会，因为我们可以带朋友在一个很家庭温暖的气息下来学习。
Our spiritual convocation is coming up in less than 2 weeks.
那我们的灵恩布道会也在2周之内就要解开了。
In preparation for this spiritual convocation, there are so much things that we could do to help out.
那要预备这个灵恩会呢，我们有很多事情都能够来帮助。
And like I said, that these services in serving God could translate into a reward in heaven.
那我们对神的服侍呢，可以转换成天上的财宝。
There's so much opportunity for us to work for the Lord and to store up treasure.
我们实际上有很多的机会能够来服侍神，来累积财宝
Let us-
在天上。
Let us be wiser than Solomon and excuse me, and Steve Jobs to grab onto these opportunities to store these treasure in heaven.
那我们要比贾伯斯和所罗门王呢，要有智慧一点，来抓住机会，累积财宝在天上。
So that at the end of the days, at the end of our days, that we don't look back and regret that we did not store up any treasure in heaven.
在我们即将要离开世界的时候，我们不会后悔说我们没有在天上累积财宝。
That we look back and we could say that I have done good deeds.
那我们可以在要过世之前呢，回过头来看呢，说我已经做好了，
I have collected my reward in heaven.
我已经累积了我的财富在天上。
May God help us all.
愿神帮助我们每个人。
Let us sing hymn 415.
唱诗415首。 请坐。
We'll kneel down to pray.
我们要跪下来祷告。
In our prayer, let's remember tomorrow's family evangelical service and next week's family evangelical service.
让我们在祷告中纪念明天和下礼拜天要举开的家庭布道会。
And then on April 16th to the 20th, our Hillsboro's spiritual convocation.
还有4月16号到20号的喜乐坡的灵恩布道会。
Let us pray to ask God to give us the strength, give us the wisdom to serve Him and to bring His sheep to His fold.
我们在祷告中求神给我们力量和智慧，能够带领他的羊只来到他的羊群。
That we could take the opportunity to preach unto brothers and sisters.
让我们能够把握机会来传福音，
To preach unto friends.
来传福音给我们的朋友，
And then also to guide people to church.
也带领人来教会。
Let's all kneel down to pray.
那我们一起跪下来祷告。